In the vast blue expanse of the Mediterranean, storm was gathering in the spring of 1565. This wasn't a storm of wind and rain, but of steel, gunpowder, and an unyielding clash of empires. On one side stood Suleiman the Magnificent, the powerful Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, commanding a colossal armada the likes of which the sea had rarely witnessed. On the other, a tiny, rocky island fortress called Malta, defended by the Knights of St. John. This is the story of one of history's most epic and brutal sieges, the Great Siege of Malta. By the mid-16th century, the Knights of St. John, a Catholic military order, were a thorn in the side of the Ottoman Empire. From their new home on Malta, granted to them after they were driven from Rhodes, they launched relentless raids on Ottoman shipping, disrupting trade and freeing Christian slaves. For Sultan Suleiman, this was more than an annoyance. It was an insult to his authority and a strategic threat to his control of the Mediterranean. He vowed to wipe the Knights off the face of the earth, just as he had done on Rhodes decades earlier. The stage was set for a monumental confrontation. On May 18, 1565, the horizon off Malta darkened. It was the Ottoman fleet. Imagine the sight: nearly 200 warships, galleons, and transport vessels carrying an invasion force of around 40,000 men. This army was a cross-section of the Ottoman military machine elite, janissaries, fearsome Sipahi cavalry, and thousands of hardened soldiers, all under the command of the veteran general Mustafa Pasha. Accompanying them was the legendary Admiral Piali Pasha and the notorious corsair Turgut Reis, the drawn sword of Islam, whose very name struck fear into Christian hearts. They brought with them an arsenal of massive siege cannons, capable of turning stone fortresses into dust. Standing against this overwhelming force was a small, determined garrison. The Grand Master of the Knights, Jean Parisot de la Valette, was 70 years old. But his will was forged from iron. He commanded a mixed force of about 6,000 fighting men. This included around 600 Knights of St. John, professional soldiers from the noble houses of Europe, alongside several thousand Maltese militia fishermen, farmers, and townspeople who knew this was a fight not just for the Knights, but for their homes, their families, and their very existence. As the Ottoman fleet appeared, La Valette gathered his knights in the Church of St. Lawrence. He delivered a speech that would echo through history. He reminded them of their faith, their vows, and the stakes of the battle ahead. He told them that this small island was now the last bastion of Christendom in the central Mediterranean. There would be no retreat, no surrender. They would either be victorious or die where they stood. With this solemn vow, they prepared for the storm. The Ottoman commanders knew that to conquer Malta, they had to control its two magnificent harbors, the Grand Harbour and Marsamxett Harbour. Guarding the entrance to both was a small but crucial star-shaped fortress perched on the tip of the Sabaras Peninsula, Fort St Elmo. Mustafa Pasha believed that this fort, which the Knights themselves considered the weakest link in their defenses, would fall within 3 or 4 days. He was disastrously wrong. The bombardment began on May 24th, from the high ground of Mount Sabaras. Dozens of massive Ottoman cannons, some firing stone balls weighing over 100 pounds, opened up a relentless, thunderous barrage. The noise was deafening, a constant earthquake of explosions that shook the very foundations of the island. Day after day, the cannons pounded St. Elmo, chipping away at its stone walls, sending plumes of dust and debris into the sky. Inside the fort, the defenders endured a living hell. The knights and soldiers were subjected to a non-stop hailstorm of stone, iron, and fire. Yet they refused to break. Under the cover of darkness, small boats would ferry reinforcements and supplies across the Grand Harbour from the main strongholds of Birgu and Senglea, while carrying the wounded back. The garrison of St. Elmo knew they were a sacrificial pawn. Their mission was not to win, but to delay, to bleed the Ottoman army and buy precious time for the main defenses to be strengthened, and for a promised relief force from Sicily to arrive. The initial Ottoman assaults were thrown back with horrific losses. The defenders fought with a desperate ferocity. They used swords, pikes, and arquebuses, but also more terrifying weapons. They rolled burning hoops coated in pitch and gunpowder down on the attackers, and threw earthenware pots filled with a flammable mixture known as Greek fire, which clung to a soldier's clothing and skin, causing agonizing burns. The narrow breaches in the walls became kill zones, choked with the bodies of fallen janissaries. Days turned into weeks. Mustafa Pasha's prediction of a quick victory had dissolved into a bloody stalemate. The frustration in the Ottoman camp grew. The arrival of the feared corsair Turgut Reis only intensified the assault. He repositioned the cannons to create a deadly crossfire, hammering St Elmo from 3 sides. The small fort, now little more than a mound of rubble and splintered wood, was systematically being erased. The defenders' situation grew ever more desperate. The small trickle of reinforcements from across the harbor became nearly impossible as Ottoman guns now commanded the waterways. The garrison was being whittled down, man by man. The knights inside sent a messenger to La Valette, begging for permission to withdraw, to sally out and die fighting rather than be buried under the ruins. La Valette's response was brutal and unwavering. He understood their sacrifice was essential. He refused their request, effectively sentencing them to death. He told them their duty was to hold the fort until the very last man. To shame those who had asked to retreat, he sent a commission to inspect the fort. They reported it was untenable. La Valette, in a calculated move, offered to let the commissioners take over the defense themselves. Humbled, they refused, and the original defenders, their honor now on the line, pledged to fight to the end. By late June, after nearly a month of constant battle, Fort St Elmo was on its last legs. The final assault came on June 23rd. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers swarmed over the ruins. There was no more gunpowder, no more room to maneuver. It was a brutal, hand-to-hand slaughter in the dust and blood. The last handful of knights, many of them already wounded, made their final stand in the chapel, fighting back to back until they were all cut down. Not a single defender in the fort survived to be taken prisoner. Mustafa Pasha had finally taken St Elmo, but the cost was staggering. He had lost thousands of his best troops, including the brilliant Turgut Reis, who was mortally wounded by a stray cannon shot. What he thought would take days had taken a month. Looking across the Grand Harbour at the still-defiant fortresses of Birgu and Senglea, he is said to have remarked, "If the son has cost us so much, what price will we have to pay for the father?" The fall of St Elmo was a devastating blow to the knights, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. The incredible resistance had bought La Valette critical time and had inflicted crippling losses on the Ottoman army. The siege was far from over. The main event, the assault on the heart of the knights' defenses, was about to begin. The fight for Malta had just entered its most brutal chapter. The story of the Great Siege is a testament to human endurance, courage, and the idea that even against impossible odds, a determined few can defy an empire. Thank you for watching. If you found this chapter of history as compelling as I do, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this incredible story. See you next time.